Don't ignore this. A secret letter from your soulmate has arrived for you. My beloved child. Don't ignore this, because a secret letter from your soulmate has arrived for you, and what is hidden inside it was never supposed to reach you this way. For days, this person has been carrying words they could not say out loud. They tried to bury them beneath silence, distractions, and ordinary conversations, but last night something changed. They sat alone with a thought they had been avoiding, and your face kept returning to their mind. Then they began to write. Not a casual message. Not a few careless sentences. A letter. A confession written slowly, with pauses between certain lines, because even putting these feelings into words made their heart race. But here is where the mystery begins. Halfway through that letter, they almost stopped. They nearly tore it up. Something frightened them about you finally knowing the truth. So why did they continue? And what did they write that they have been too afraid to tell you directly? Don't skip, because the first secret inside this letter is only the beginning. The letter begins differently than you might expect. There is no dramatic declaration at first. Instead, your soulmate admits something painfully simple: they have been pretending to be stronger around you than they really are. Every time they seemed distant, there was something happening beneath the surface. Every time they delayed saying what they felt, they were fighting a private fear that getting closer to you would also give them something precious to lose. And then comes a sentence they rewrote 3 times before leaving it on the page. They admit that there was one particular moment with you they never forgot. You may have considered it small. Maybe it was a look, a quiet conversation, or a moment when you showed kindness without expecting anything back. But to them, it changed something. After that day, they began comparing every connection to the feeling they experienced around you. Why did they never tell you? Because another person knew how deeply they felt, and that person said something that planted doubt in their mind. But now your soulmate has discovered that the warning they believed may never have been true. That discovery is exactly why this secret letter exists. Your soulmate recently learned that part of what kept them silent came from someone else's assumptions, not from anything you actually said or did. Suddenly, memories began rearranging themselves in their mind. Moments they once interpreted as rejection started looking different. Your silence no longer seemed cold. Your distance no longer automatically meant you had stopped caring. And for the first time, they wondered whether both of you had been protecting yourselves from the same thing? Losing each other. That realization pushed them back toward the unfinished letter. They added another page, and this page contained something much more personal. They wrote about what they wish they could change, what they would do differently if given another chance, and why they still feel there is an unfinished chapter between you. But before finishing, they wrote one question at the bottom of the page and stared at it for a long time. Stay till the end, because that question could completely change what happens next between you, and the words they wrote immediately after it reveal the real reason this letter has finally arrived. The question at the bottom of that page was the one your soulmate had been terrified to ask: if I came back with nothing hidden and told you exactly how I feel, would there still be a place for me in your heart? They stared at those words longer than anything else they had written. Because suddenly, this was no longer just a letter about the past. It was a decision about the future. Your soulmate realized that silence had protected them from rejection, but it had also kept them from discovering what might have happened if they had simply been honest with you. Then they wrote something even more revealing. They admitted there were nights when they almost contacted you, moments when they opened a conversation, typed several words, and erased everything before you could ever see it. Why? Because each time they came close, the same fear returned. What if you had already moved on? What if their hesitation had lasted too long? But one recent detail made them question that fear completely, and it involved something they unexpectedly heard about you. What they heard was not a dramatic rumor. It was something far more believable, and that made it impossible to ignore. Someone mentioned you in conversation and casually suggested that perhaps your feelings had never disappeared as completely as your soulmate assumed. Your soulmate tried to act unaffected, but inside, everything shifted. They began remembering the last meaningful interaction between you. Your expression. The things you said. More importantly, the things neither of you managed to say. That night, they returned to the letter and added another confession: "I think I misunderstood you." Those 5 words changed the entire tone of what followed. Suddenly, they were no longer explaining why they stayed away. They were admitting what staying away had cost them. They wrote that they missed the feeling of being understood without having to explain every emotion. They missed your presence in ordinary moments. And then they revealed something they had never admitted to anyone before. Even when they tried imagining a completely different future, somehow you kept appearing inside it. But the most important page had not been written yet. Your soulmate stopped, walked away, and returned later with a decision that frightened them more than writing the letter itself. They decided that if these words ever reached you, they would no longer hide behind vague hints or mixed signals. They would tell you what they actually wanted. That is why the final unfinished page begins with a sentence unlike everything before it: "There is something I need to ask you before I let this story end." Don't skip. Something huge is waiting for you, because immediately beneath that sentence your soulmate began describing a choice they are considering right now. It is not about repeating the past. It is about approaching you differently, with honesty instead of guessing and courage instead of silence. But there is one final truth they believe you deserve to know before they make that move. They have kept it hidden because revealing it could change how you understand every period of distance between you. And when they finally wrote that truth down, they realized the secret letter was no longer just a confession, it had become a promise. That promise was written in one trembling sentence: "If I get another chance to speak to you, I will not make you guess what you mean to me." Your soulmate paused after writing it because they knew exactly how much their silence had confused you. There were moments when you may have wondered whether you mattered at all, while behind closed doors they were thinking about you far more than you realized. The hidden truth is that their distance was never as simple as losing interest. They had convinced themselves that stepping away would make these feelings disappear. Instead, the opposite happened. Small reminders of you became impossible to ignore. A familiar phrase. A place connected to a memory. A quiet moment when they instinctively wanted to tell you something, only to remember that the closeness between you had changed. But then the letter reveals something unexpected. Your soulmate admits there was one specific day when they finally understood that avoiding you was not helping them move forward, it was only teaching them how deeply your absence affected them. They do not describe that day dramatically. That is what makes the confession feel so powerful. Everything around them was ordinary, yet they suddenly experienced something they wished you had been there to share. Their first thought was you. Without thinking, they reached for their phone. Your name was still there, familiar enough to stir everything they had been suppressing. They almost contacted you. Almost. But fear stopped them again. Later that evening, however, they asked themselves a question they could no longer escape: how many moments am I willing to lose because I'm afraid of one honest conversation? That question followed them for days, until finally they returned to the secret letter. This time, their words became clearer. They admitted they do not expect you to forget the confusion or pretend nothing happened. They know trust cannot be demanded. They know feelings cannot be forced. What they want is simply an opportunity to tell you the truth without hiding behind pride. And there is one truth in particular they desperately want you to understand. Someone influenced their decision to stay silent, but your soulmate no longer believes that person understood your connection at all. That realization changed everything because your soulmate began separating what they actually knew about you from what other people had assumed. They remembered your actions instead of someone else's interpretation of them. They remembered how you listened, how certain conversations felt different, and how there were moments when your eyes seemed to say what neither of you had the courage to voice. Suddenly, the story they had been telling themselves started falling apart. Maybe you had not rejected them. Maybe you had been waiting for clarity too. And that possibility is why the final page of the letter now carries more weight than all the others combined. Stay till the end, because your soulmate has written something there that they have never said directly to you. It is not simply, "I miss you." It goes much deeper. They describe what they are prepared to do if the door between you is still even slightly open. But before revealing that decision, they confess that there is one thing about your last meaningful moment together that they have remembered incorrectly all this time, and they only discovered the truth about it very recently. What they discovered about that final meaningful moment left them questioning everything they had believed since the two of you became distant. Your soulmate had carried one memory like proof that you wanted them to let go. They remembered your hesitation, the way the conversation ended, and one sentence that seemed painfully final at the time. But recently, they learned there was something happening in your world that they never understood. Suddenly, your behavior looked less like rejection and more like someone protecting feelings that had become too complicated to explain. Your soulmate went back through that memory again and again, asking one unsettling question. What if I walked away from someone who was waiting for me to stay? That question appears in the letter exactly as they felt it. No excuses. No attempt to blame you. And beneath it, they admit something even more important. If they had known then what they understand now, they would have handled that moment completely differently. Instead of disappearing into uncertainty, they say they would have asked you one honest question. They would have stayed long enough to hear what you were actually trying to communicate. This realization seems to have broken something open inside them, because the next section of the letter becomes unusually vulnerable. Your soulmate admits they replayed imaginary versions of that conversation, wondering what might have happened if either of you had spoken without fear. But then they stop looking backward. They write, "I cannot change that moment, but I can choose what I do with the truth now." And that is where the letter shifts from regret into intention. They are considering reaching toward you again, but not with some dramatic demand for an immediate answer. They want to approach carefully. Honestly. They want to acknowledge what happened and allow you to decide what comes next. Don't skip, because there is another detail hidden between these lines. Before making any move, your soulmate has been watching for one small sign that reconnecting would not disturb your peace. And they believe they may have already seen it. That possible sign has given them courage, but it has also made them cautious. They do not want to mistake hope for certainty again. So on the final page, they make a promise to respect whatever truth you give them, even if it is difficult to hear. Yet immediately after that promise comes the most emotional confession in the entire letter so far. They write that if there is still something unfinished between you, they do not want fear, pride, or another person's opinion to decide its ending. They want the two people who actually live this connection, you and them, to finally speak for themselves. Then comes a line they almost crossed out: there is a future I have imagined with you, and I have never completely stopped imagining it. But something huge is waiting for you, because that future is not described as some impossible fantasy. Your soulmate mentions one surprisingly simple moment they hope to experience with you, and it reveals exactly what they have been longing for. Yet before describing it, they confess why they have kept this entire letter secret until now, and the reason has everything to do with what they are preparing to risk. The reason they kept the letter secret was not because they doubted what they felt, it was because sending it meant surrendering control over what happened next. As long as those pages remained hidden, your soulmate could imagine every possible outcome without facing a real one. They could picture you welcoming them back, but they could also protect themselves from discovering that perhaps your heart had changed. Then they wrote something painfully honest. I have been waiting for certainty before taking a risk that can never come with certainty. That realization changed them. They understood that love does not always arrive with guarantees. Sometimes two people simply have to speak honestly and allow the truth to decide what follows. And that simple future they imagined with you? It was not some perfect scene. They pictured sitting across from you somewhere quiet, without distractions, finally having the conversation that should have happened long ago. No pretending. No guessing. Just two people looking directly at each other and answering one question. Is there still something here worth protecting? Your soulmate admits they have imagined that conversation many times, but recently the imagined ending changed. Before, they always pictured themselves doing most of the talking, explaining everything they had hidden. Now, strangely, they imagine listening to you. They want to know what those months of uncertainty felt like from your side. They want to hear whether there were moments when you almost reached toward them too. More importantly, they want to know whether their silence ever made you believe you were not important. Because the letter contains a confession they clearly struggled to write. If my fear ever made you question your worth to me, I wish I could take that confusion back. They cannot rewrite the past, and they know that. But they can stop repeating it. Don't skip, because this is where the letter becomes even more revealing. Your soulmate explains that recently they made a private decision about you. They decided that if another genuine opportunity appears, they will not run from it again. But something happened shortly after making that decision. Something that made them wonder whether the opportunity was already beginning to appear? It was a small coincidence, almost easy to dismiss, yet it struck them deeply because of its timing. Something connected to you unexpectedly resurfaced, a memory, a familiar detail, something that brought back a moment they thought they had buried. Instead of pushing it away, your soulmate allowed themselves to feel what came with it. And what came was not only sadness. There was warmth, hope, even a strange sense of relief, because they finally stopped fighting the truth that you still mattered. That night they opened the letter again and added what may be its most important sentence yet: I am no longer writing this because I miss what we were. I am writing because I need to know what we could still become. Stay till the end, because directly beneath those words they finally begin revealing what they intend to do next. There is a specific step they are considering, something more real than another private promise. But before they take it, they want you to understand one final secret about why they hesitated for so long, and when that secret comes out, you may realize their silence was hiding an emotion you never expected. The emotion hiding beneath their silence was not indifference, it was vulnerability, deeper than they ever allowed you to see. Your soulmate finally admits in the letter that you became important enough to frighten them. Not because you did anything wrong, but because being truly seen by someone meant they could no longer hide behind the version of themselves that always appeared composed. Around you, certain defenses began falling naturally. They noticed themselves wanting to tell you things they normally kept private. They remembered details about you without trying. They cared about your reactions more than they wanted to admit. And when they realized how emotionally significant you had become, their instinct was to regain control by creating distance. But distance did not erase the connection. It only created questions. Now they understand the painful contradiction. The very thing they did to protect themselves may have been the thing that hurt both of you most. That is why one sentence in the letter feels different from everything before it. I should have trusted you with the truth instead of making the decision for both of us. After writing that sentence, your soulmate reveals the specific step they have been considering. They want to reach out, not with a dramatic declaration, not with pressure, and certainly not expecting you to immediately return to where things once were. They simply want to open a door to an honest conversation. They have even imagined the first words several times, deleting anything that sounds rehearsed or defensive. What they want to say is surprisingly simple: can we talk about what really happened between us? That question matters because your soulmate is finally ready to hear an answer they cannot control. If you were hurt, they want to understand it. If you misunderstood them, they want to explain. If both of you still carry feelings beneath the silence, they want those feelings to finally have a voice. But don't skip, because while preparing to take this step, they realized something else. There is one part of the secret letter they have deliberately kept separate from all the other pages. They folded it differently because those words contain a confession they are not sure they can say while looking into your eyes. On that separate page, your soulmate stops explaining the past completely. There are no excuses there. No mention of misunderstandings, timing, or other people's opinions. It is simply their heart speaking without protection. They admit that when they imagine hearing from you again, they do not picture some grand romantic scene. They picture seeing your name appear and feeling that familiar rush they thought they had outgrown. They picture hearing your voice and realizing it still feels strangely familiar. Most importantly, they confess that a part of them has been quietly hoping you would somehow know they never completely closed the door. Something huge is waiting for you, because beneath that confession they wrote one final sentence: T.